life is a sort of a three-legged stool for a teenager, all of the legs of her stool are rather wobbly, right? Home, family, and school are sort of wobbly. So I wanted people to sort of have a little bit of empathy going into that story, and learn that people who end up being trafficked are human beings, and that these are teenagers. So I never want them to forget that Charlize Jones is a teenager. So when they see her coloring and doing different things, it's my way of reminding them, hey, we're talking about children here.
Sylvia and me.
Sylvia and me.
Sylvia and me.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Beckerman, host of the podcast series Sylvia and Me, conversations with extraordinary, inspiring women.
I am Sharon G Flake, a young adult and children's author, most known for The Skin I'm In, and recently the follow-up novel to that book, The Life I'm In. Welcome to Sylvia and Me.
Sharon, thank you so much. It's great to have you with me here today. Well, here you can see we're not exactly here in the same room, but yes, you are an award-winning author. In fact, for your first novel, The Skin I'm In, you won the Coretta Scott King Author Honor Award winner. I had
Right,
to read that, so I got it correct.
right.
And that's among other
Yeah.
awards.
Yeah, I was so excited to get that award. And the novel has been published in, around the world and read around the world. There are about 1 million copies out there floating around. So I'm pretty happy.
Now, I want to just talk about you for a little bit and how you got started. I know you're one of 6 children. You're the second youngest of 6. You grew up in Pittsburgh,
Oh
um,
no, in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
People think I'm
Nice.
from Pittsburgh. I've been here so long. I grew up in a way. Came here for college. So in a way I did grow up here to some degree, but born and raised in North Philadelphia.
Okay. And when did you decide to really start? Why writing? Did you always want to write? Um, Tell us how that actually got started.
A lot of times young people ask me, did I write in middle school and high school? Because a lot of authors will tell you they've got that bug in elementary school. I wasn't one of those authors, right? I went to college to be a doctor. I had also been a candy striper, like in high school. So
Yeah.
I went to a Saturday program. I was really serious about being a doctor until I got to college, and it's like, what? you know, Mathematics, you're struggling and sweating in those classrooms. Um, I I decided, okay, well, maybe this is not the best career for me. And I kept switching careers, but always for some reason it had to do with science or math, which I turns out I really suck at, right? But I was also taking writing classes. And I realized I was pretty good at it, that I really enjoyed it. I was good at it. And that sort of started me on my way, right? I had an internship in public relations at Pitt. So, again, more writing. And I just decided, okay, I'll be an English major. And I'll, I don't know if I thought beyond that at that point. I knew I was going to be an English major. What kind of job I thought I would get after that, I wasn't quite sure, but I was enjoying writing in school.
Well, I understand that the birth of your daughter, Brittany, kind of precipitated you actually sitting down and writing. I don't remember the name of your first book, and that's bad, but I don't. But you used to write, and then you'd read the stories to her daycare.
Yeah, well, you know what? You don't have anything to worry about because my first novel really is The Skin I'm In. I
Right,
was
but
writing
there
picture
were other
books
ones that you did.
before then, but they had not gotten published. They were being rejected. But I would go to my daughter's daycare center and sort of read, you know, um, make up stories, read things I had written. So they were really good about that. I had also been from the beginning when my daughter was born, telling her stories about dark skinned girls that could fly and solve crimes. I wanted her to know that being dark was a good thing, right? And that she could do anything, even when she was too young to realize anything about color or skin tone. And I tell people, if I tell my daughter, if she weren't born, I'm not sure I would have ever gotten published. Not for fiction, right? I had done some nonfiction writing in the city for literary publications, things like that. Fiction, I was in a writers group for a little bit, but mainly I would like write one week. Well, then I might not write for 2 months, right? I was that kind of writer. But then when she was born, it was like the lights went on, right? And I just started writing and I was very consistent finally because I was 42 when the book was published. So finally I sort of it all sort of came together for me.
Okay. And the protagonist in the Skin I'm In, which you started out, Shar, and you talked a lot about bullying in that book. And so your newest book, which is considered a sister book to it, sort of takes the same character and really sees her growth. She somehow gets involved or on the outskirts of human trafficking and develops some kind of empathy.
Well, you
So,
know what? I'm sorry.
no,
Absolutely.
go ahead.
Just let me back up a little bit and tell people who haven't read it. The Skin I'm In is a novel about a dark skinned girl who gets picked on. She gets picked on by a couple of people and sort of has this aha moment. That's Malika, where she has this aha moment that says, well, if I hang out with Charlize Jones, then and do her homework and be nice to her, people won't bully me anymore. Well, the problem is that Charlize Jones starts to bully her, and Charlize Jones ends up being the protagonist in The Life I'm In. Char is somebody in The Skin I'm In that people, they weren't in love with her, but they were concerned about her because Char was a bully, but she got bullied at home. Her sister didn't physically hit her or anything, but her parents had died and had died tragically. And so her sister, like 25, 26, did the best that she could. She had parties to raise money and to pay bills, right, and to buy clothing and that sort of thing. And she had Char like as almost like a servant, right, waiting on adults, serving drinks and food late at night. So that's what I mean, sort of about and wasn't always speaking to her very nicely. And so people were concerned about her. And so I took her and I made her the protagonist in The Life I'm In. Um, and sometimes people ask, why did you finally do it? They asked me for years to do it, to do a follow-up. And I never planned to, because when you have a book like Skin that's fairly iconic, right? People write about it in their PhD dissertations. They teach it in elementary school. They teach it in college. People just love the teacher in the book and they love Malika and they love the story and how it unfolds. And so when you have that, it's a little frightening to, say, I'm going to do another follow-up or a sequel. Sylvia, I know you've read books or seen movies and you thought, oh, why didn't they stop with the first one? They just kept going. So for years when I got the question, I said, I'm not, no, 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 I'll never do it. But I had a couple of reasons why I did it. I'll just name a couple, two. One is over the years, just like you, Sylvia, I've seen the uptick in trafficking. We've seen more reports, more shows, movies about it. And I don't know if you have children or not, but having a daughter, even though she was grown, it was frightening to see all of that. And I go to a lot of schools and I talk to kids. And so it's frightening what the world might hold for them, for some of them. So that was one reason. The other reason, I guess it sort of was time. It was time. I think I had matured and grown up enough. Um, and one day I was having a conversation with somebody that said, hey, would you ever do a follow-up novel? I gave my typical response at first, no, never, not going to happen. But if I did do it, it would be from Charlize Jones's perspective and it would be about human trafficking. And so that day I went home and I started writing.
And what you're writing about, yes, it's fiction, and I know that people have asked you, were you bullied? And the answer, I believe, is no.
No, I
But
wasn't bullied.
but you're talking about real life issues,
Right.
especially nowadays. You're talking about real life um, issues that young people, come across on
Right,
a daily
right.
basis. And I think it's wonderful that you took Shar and took her character that people might have been worried about, who was the bully, and now gave her the ability to learn what empathy is all about.
And I think people are empathetic towards Shar too, right? So that when the novel opens up, uh, sh- let me just back up a little bit. The life I'm in is the answer to the question that people asked about the skin I'm in, which is whatever became of Charlize Jones, right? So, did she ever get on that bus? Because her sister had said, listen, if you fail seventh grade again, she had failed twice. If you don't behave, I'll send you south. And we know that that happens in Black families, not always as a form of punishment, but almost as a reset. Maybe grandpa, grandma will be able to help you get to the next phase. And so when it opens up, we have Shar. Already you can see she's a different girl because she's pleading with Malika, who she says she hasn't talked to in about a year, begging her almost, please have your mom, Malika, call my sister and intercede on my behalf, right? So that I won't have to leave and go south. She doesn't want to leave for a couple of reasons. One is who Sylvia wants to leave home for the most part. When I did work with children in foster care, I will tell you, our aim was always to get them back home if we could. But no matter what their life was like at home, I would say 95% of those children wanted to go back home. Right. And so, no matter what Shar's life is like, she wants to go home. No matter what we adults may think of her home, she wants to go home. And we see for the first time, really, that Malika herself has changed, right? She's finally put up boundaries because when you're dealing with bullies, part of it becomes a boundary problem, right? They're pushing against those boundaries or you don't have boundaries. So she's putting up her own bully boundaries and says, no, you're going to have to talk to my mom yourself. And Shar's not going to do that. So the next thing we know, she's on a bus and she's headed to Alabama to be with her grandpaps, her grandmother and grandfather. But here's what happens. She does what a lot of teenagers do. You know, she makes a quick decision when she's on that bus. I'm not going to go there. I'm 16. I'm self sufficient. I could live on my own and take care of myself, right? She feels betrayed by her sister for sending her. She feels betrayed also by her sister because now her sister and Char's old teacher has sort of become friends. So her sister is also starting to evolve and change into another person. And that decision to not go home, to not go to her grandmother's house, sort of interrupts her life in not a good way. It's not Charlize's fault that she's trafficked, right? These are adults that do this business most times. They can be men or women who traffic young people,
Very true.
right? Or traffic people, period. Just an aside, human trafficking is $150 billion global business.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And, one of the things that I really think is wonderful in your writing is how you can connect these characters and get your audience, which is the young adult, to understand, to be able to follow, to see that, yes, a person is a bully, but when they're that young, they can be put in a situation where they're almost, begging to have people accept them, that they can change because of circumstances. And you have her friend who was the protagonist in the original story also grow. So people can grow. It's not that people change. People do have the ability if they want to. Those that don't want to are never going to.
Are never going to.
No.
And I wanted people to know from the beginning that Charlize wanted to change. She did not know how to change, right? I needed to build some empathy for Charlize because in the first book, She's pretty, she's a bully. There's not a whole lot that's likable about her. And it's easy to forget in the first book, hey, wait a minute, here's a kid, both her parents were killed, right? Here's a kid that's that's struggling at home. Here's a kid that has problems in school. So all of those three core, if life is a sort of a three-legged stool for a teenager, all of her the legs of her stool are rather wobbly, right? Home, family, and school are sort of wobbly. So I wanted people to sort of have a little bit of empathy going into that story, and learn that people who end up being trafficked are human beings, and that these are teenagers. So I never want them to forget that Charlize Jones is a teenager. So when they see her coloring and doing different things, it's my way of reminding them, hey, we're talking about children here, right?
That's another point that I wanted to raise, and you've raised it beautifully. The fact that we do not remember all the time that they're young, that teenagers are teenagers and they are growing. There are certain things that we as adults need to point them in the right direction and hope that they take the morals and the truths that we give them and be able to move with their life in the direction we'd like them to. But there are always, for a lot, there are bumps in the road, and
Life,
people
yes,
need to remember they are children.
exactly.
Basically,
Thank
what
you.
we give them is, a lot of who they're going to be. And if we don't give them that chance and hear them, um, so you've had a great impact on teenagers. Uh,
I've spoken to about, I think, sometimes I try to do the count, I've lost count years ago, about at least 200,000 kids, just in terms of going to schools over 22 years and visiting with them. And then there's the ones that have written me over the years. And then there, so, and then there's the book itself. So I just heard from a young girl yesterday was, who emailed me, well, came into my phone, and she just said, hey, I just wanted to let you know I love your work. I'm 16 and I'm dark skinned, and your book needs to be a movie because this is real. So that has to do with the skin I'm in. And I'm expecting sort of the same responses from the world when it comes to the life I'm in. That either they didn't know about this, or they're going through it, or they are learning about it, or and wanting to understand it more, or they've gotten out of a situation because of it. I think I try to write to entertain, but I also try to write to inform and uplift. So I'm always hopeful that my work does some good on the planet. And when you're looking at human trafficking, it's a human rights violation, right? So that people are being, you know, just just an aside, human trafficking is sex sex or exploitation, but it's also hard labor, right? Where we take young people and put them on farms and work them all kinds of hours, where we take them and hire them as domestics around the world. Somebody figures they're paying their way into America or somewhere else, and maybe they're told, "Oh, you'll work, 4 days a week for X amount of dollars for 3 months," and then you get there, and it's like 4 years later or something, or years later, you're still there working 24 hours a day, not allowed to leave home. So there's some really terrible stories. Child soldiers. We don't think about that when we sometimes watch TV and we see a boy who's 5, or well, maybe 8 or 10 or 12, and he's a soldier, and you're like, oh my God, forced into those situations. And so I think these kinds of stories are hard on a certain level, but they're necessary, so that people understand, but also so we get to see the core and soul of children, right? And that's something you can do with a novel that you can't always do with a snapshot on the news. You can show some pieces, but you're okay, you're flashing that camera, they're on the news and they get 1 second. you can't always see the intricacies of how did they get there, who are those people that traffic them, how the and what's life like them like for them on the other side. So for sure, she, a lot of these people who are trafficked, because it's men, women, boys, girls, there's the issue of trauma as a result, and how do you work through that, and what's on the other side of the trauma. And those are all the things that people, readers, will get to understand and see when they read The Life I'm In.
Well, it's exceedingly eye-opening for a lot of young people. So what are some of the most common questions that you've been asked by these these students, these young people who you've spoken at schools? You do Zoom now because
Right,
there's a
right.
pandemic, but what are some of the most common, frequent questions that you've been asked?
Well, this one is, you're going to laugh, but one of the funniest ones, one of the frequent ones I get is, "Are you rich?" So they go straight to the money, right? Are you rich? Do you drive a Range Rover? And I'm always like, no. For a lot of years, I drove a Saturn, and so when they heard that, their faces would fall like, what? So that's one question. The other one I get a lot is, were you bullied? Is this your life? Did you interview somebody? So sometimes they don't understand, because I write from a girl's perspective, a boy's perspective, an adult's perspective, right? Somebody who might be Latinx at times. They don't understand that, no, I'm writing that. I didn't go and interview somebody and take their words and literally write them down. So sometimes they think that, because they can't understand, how can you, I'm 65, you're 65, you're 55. How do you know how we speak, and how do you know how we talk? And so that's one of those things. And I go to do a lot of school visits, but I'm not the type of person, I'm not listening to their conversations and all that stuff. I'm present, so I'm present, right? So I'm not thinking, hey, that's a really good word. I'm sort of, I think my gift and my ability to do the voices the way they are, a lot of it is gifting. It's just something that I was born and blessed with. And if you work your blessing enough, right, it becomes your craft, and you know how to do that thing. So that's another question I get asked. Um, I get asked a lot of questions of, like, how can, like, sometimes they'll say, I'm being bullied. How can I get a bully to stop bullying me? Or they want to know how they could be a writer. I think young people have very, very high expectations of themselves, which is good on the one hand, but sometimes it worries me, because they'll say, "Miss Sharon, I've been writing this book, and I just can't get it right." And they're fifth graders. And I'm like, baby, you're in the fifth grade, right? Have fun, right, with it, and write as long as, take the story as far as you can go. And then if you can't go any further, start a new story, because every story wasn't meant to be finished. It was meant to teach you something about the writing process. So I try to, like, let them, okay, chill, relax. You don't have to be so hard on yourself. So that's sort of an interesting thing.
That really is an interesting question because of so much pressure these days on children, and especially now with the school situation being the way it is. I can see how so many try something, and if they can't totally complete it or complete it to their satisfaction, they think that they failed, and are scared because they can't move any further. And what you just said, the answer to this young girl, is wonderful, because there is always another story, and who knows, maybe she'll go back to it, or it's all a growing process. And no matter what, whether it's writing or building something, or sports, to be able to go ahead and try it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but there's always something else.
There's always something else. I think some of that pressure is the technology and the internet. I mean, I'm not sure I would be published if I had to go out there today, because everywhere you look, even now, I'm looking and saying, "Oh, look what they're doing there." You know what I mean? And we forget sometimes that Well, because you're putting out your book jacket doesn't mean that you have that you're great at writing, right? Or B, that you've have a legacy or a history of writing behind you. So some of it is a little bit smoke and mirrors, but young people look at it and think, oh my God, like he can tap dance and he can do this and he can do that. So I have to do this. And all of that pressure they have to feel. I remember going to a school once and I asked the question, about the internet. Like, do you guys feel pressure? And I was surprised really at the answer. It was a table, it was like maybe 10 young people, elementary school. But they started talking, and one boy told me, my mother says, look at so and so's video. You could dance better than him. You should be on doing your own videos. And he was like, but I don't want to do any videos. You see what I mean? And then somebody else starts saying, oh, yeah, my mother or my father has said this about that. And I was like, whoa. And this might have been 5 years ago. So I would say 3 to 5 years, maybe 3 years ago. So that was one thing helped me understand, oh my gosh, I knew you were sort of under pressure, but I didn't know how much pressure you guys were really under when your own parent is saying, you need to outperform this kid on here via this technology, right? And you don't even want it for yourself, right?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of young people feel pressured into doing something that they really have no interest in doing. And the
Right.
other thing is like you said, that first question where you said, you'll laugh, but when you think about it, not everyone who gets published is going to it, automatically make millions of dollars where they're
Right.
going. They don't understand that there's a lot of work involved. There's a legacy that you've earned, and there are certain things that, especially with the internet nowadays, where they see things all over the place, they figure, oh, I want to do that because this is going to happen overnight,
Well,
and
this is,
that's such a bad thing.
it's a lot of pressure. And just to go back to Shar for a minute, one of the ways that stop saying young people, the traffickers do business now. A part of that for a lot of them is technology, where they reach out and they find young people. A part of luring them in is financial sometimes, because Shar is when she runs away, right? She runs out of money. And she's able to handle herself for a while. It may not be the way we all think she should, but she's able to handle herself. She's a caretaker. And then after a while, the money dries out. And so some guy offering her to take her to lunch or whatever, at one point, she's able to say, no, I'm not, I don't need that. I don't want that. But then as money and resources dry up, it makes them runaways vulnerable to that situation. And the people that are the predators that do this, they know children. And so they know some of those pressures, right, that they're against, whether it is pressure at home. They can spot them, they groom them. They don't Young people don't end up trafficked by accident, right? Not by accident. And so it's a you know billions of dollars are at stake. And so the pressure is on, and we've got to have all sorts of conversations with our kids about the internet in general. How you doing? How you like it? What do you think? Or and not always from the, is somebody trying to do something to you on it, but just how do you use it and navigate it, to questions about you know um, trafficking. And sometimes it's hard to ask those questions. That's why young adult novels and children novelists take on different sorts of subjects, right? And some of that stuff is about castles and kings and queens, and some of that is about trafficking. Years ago, I did a book called The Broken Bike Boy and the Queen of 33rd Street. And on the surface, it might look about, it was about a girl that she was a little pushy. Um, but I would go to schools and I would say, tell me about a castle in your neighborhood. And some of those schools were not in the most wealthy districts. And they were in the districts like where I grew up. And sometimes young people would scratch their head and say, "What?" And then I'd start talking about my castle, my house, and the king of my house being a puppy and a dog, and then they got it. And it was like, well, I have, and so a book that just seems just about something everyday and average for a writer, you might have other intents and they're trying to teach and uplift and help young people feel better and understand their power and their possibility. And so the life I'm in, I hope people get to see that. I'm also talking about second chances as well as trafficking. I'm talking about a girl that is resilient and against all odds makes it to the other side, right? And facing some storms, but together with other women and other men along the way. Because if we want young people to get to the other side, we've got to be able to, like, you have those ropes, right, with the knots on them. I don't know if those sailor knots, that we've got to be able to be that knot that helps them get to the other side. So there's some people in the young people and adults that help become the knot that helps get Shar to the other side. But Shar also has her own skill set. And I think that's important because when we have young people, and a lot of times young Black urban people, we sometimes feel like, okay, they're empty vessels and we just need to fill them with all this stuff, all of our values and all that, because they don't have any. But she does, because at 16, guess what? I couldn't raise no baby. You know what I mean? And she does that in the book. And, she does some things that are strong and show her self-worth and power that even I couldn't do as a teen. So I'm hoping people see the fullness of Shar in the life I'm in, and also reach back to the skin I'm in and take a read.
Well, I am in awe of this of these two books. What you have given to young adults, to teenagers, and we call them young adults, but they're teenagers,
They're
and
teenagers.
they're children. They are growing,
Thank
but
you.
we have to look at them as children. And these stories, although fiction, especially in today's day and age, um, I think writing them as fiction is almost easier for them to be able to understand and relate to, and take away what you're looking for them to take away, even if it's just a small piece. So, Sharon, in your spare time, what do you like to do?
In my spare time, I don't know, I like to color, which is why Shar colors. I like to color, I like to read, I like to garden, and I love the movies, and they're all shut down right now.
Okay, but there are streaming movies. Yes, I love movies
I've
too.
been watching a lot of Netflix, but I'd love to be in the theater and watch those movies and
Well,
play. So
hopefully,
back
y-
there.
you know, sometime the end of this year, beginning of next year. But in the meantime, we have your books to read, um, and people can find your book on Amazon.
They can find my book on Amazon. They can find it at Barnes and Nobles and at their indie bookstores. And if they're not physically there, just ask them for it because they can catch up with it with them. I have like, I think this book is my 11th or 12th book. So
Well, Sharon, I thank you so much. This has been very, very enlightening and interesting. Um, and you never know. It definitely sounds like the makings of a movie, or maybe even a special series. And I won't ask you about a sequel to it because it almost sounds like, well, maybe 20 years from now, sure.
no, believe it or not, I'm writing. I signed a contract for a third one,
Good for
and
you.
it's from John's perspective. It's from the boy's perspective because he was another bully to Malika in the first book. So, and it's a different sort of story. So, I'm hoping people will, stay tuned for that, and they could reach me at flake.sharon@gmail.com if they want to, or go to my website, sharongflake.com, if they want to communicate with me or find out where to get the books.
Well, Sharon, again, I look forward to the third in the series coming out. And thank you again so much.
Thank
Um,
you,
and
Sylvia.
and all the best. This is great. Thank you.
You are great. Thank you so much.
You can find us on all of your popular podcast platforms. And of course, our website, sylviame.com. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned.